What is up, everyone? Today we are going to break down the UFC Saudi Arabia card from a DraftKings DFS perspective. This week's card is being headlined by Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov. And at the time of filming this video, which is Wednesday, we are down to only 11 fights. And I think that's all we're going to get. So what that means from a DFS perspective is it's just a lot harder to get unique. Now, we do have a weak main event as far as DFS goes. So we'll talk about that. Um, but without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the matchups. We'll start off with Gaziev versus Thomas Petersen. Gaziev coming up here at 9.3K. Petersen coming back at 6.9K. Gaziev is by far my least favorite spend up this week. I'd much rather go to Pavlovich, Mckinney, even Naimov up in this 9K range. But with that being said, he's still alive. He still could get a round one finish, and I think that's what he's going to need to put up a big score here. He's just not active. He's very low volume. He gets tired after about 6 minutes, and he doesn't have the takedown volume or the strike volume to make up not finishing early. So I do think he's in play, but he's going to need to finish in round one probably. And then Petersen on the other side, 6.9K plus 270. He's firmly in play for me. He's not an amazing play by any means, but you get 80 points out of him at 6.9K. That could certainly be enough. So I'm leaving him in, but really no interest in this fight overall. It's not going to be my first fight I target. If I'm building single entry, I probably don't get to this fight. But I think both sides are okay when it comes to the overall GPP environment. Moving on to Terrence McKinney versus Damir Hadzdovic. I'm keeping this simple. I really want probably max 5% Damir. I just think he gets run over here. I think McKinney comes in, he finds a round one finish, either with grappling or by KO on the feet. I think he can do it any way he wants. And it just seems like an easy setup fight for him, honestly. We know he's an exciting prospect. He's been on quite a skid, right? They kind of rushed him in a little bit. They gave him Bonfim too early. Then they gave him Sadikov, and then they give him Mike Breeden, feeding him for a win. Then they give him a Moreau, feeding him a win. Then they give him a Ribovic, step up, he loses. So I feel like this is what they're doing with McKinney, and I think he gets it done here with ease. With that being said, Hadzdovic, the reason why I'm going to leave him in, and I still am going back and forth on that, is because McKinney comes out and he brings chaos in round one. But his issue has been is that he gasses out, past the first half of the fight. And if that's in play, right, I don't think that Damir will survive the early storm. But if he does, on an 11 fight card, he could certainly get there at 7K, especially providing leverage off of what I think will be a popular McKinney. So that's the reason why I would leave him in. I'm still not convinced that I will. And McKinney is by far my preferred side of this fight. Moving on to Sergey Pavlovich, Jairzinho Rozenstruik. The first thing we'll talk about with this matchup is it's a pure striker versus striker matchup between two heavyweights. We know what that means. It means that if they don't finish, it's going to look bad from a DFS perspective, especially Sergey Pavlovich, 9.1K. If he doesn't finish, he's not getting there. Rozenstruik, same thing, but again, he is an underdog, right? We don't know which underdogs are going to win. So in an iteration where Jairzinho is the only underdog that wins on the slate, he's optimal, right? Obviously, we can't predict that, and that's unlikely to happen, but we have to be less greedy when we're talking about these underdog, low-priced fighters or just any underdog fighter in general in DFS. So Rozenstruik, 67 points in a striking decision win. I don't love it. And I actually think that Rozenstruik is a lot more live for his wins to be by decision than people think. I understand that Pavlovich is going to crash forward, try to create a collision, and look for a knockout. And if he wins, I am very confident that Pavlovich's wins will come like they always do. Round one KO, you get the knockdown, you get the 110. You even have the upside of getting the first minute finish. I know that's not a thing we can count on generally, but Pavlovich, I think that's actually realistic because he will literally go in there and try to end the fight right away. So, yes, there's the downside risk. I don't think it's likely. The fight's minus 800 to end inside the distance. I think Pavlovich is my preferred side, or I know Pavlovich is my preferred side. And Rozenstruik, I'm a little bit worried about it, again, because I do think that Rozenstruik's wins, a lot of them will be by a decision. And that might seem crazy. And let me actually look at the line here. I might take a shot on this. Yeah, if I can get like 10-1, 9-1, 10-1 on some of the domestic books when that line comes out, I might be taking a stab on that. But we'll see later this week. Overall, yeah, Pavlovich is the preferred side, and Rozenstruik is still going to be live because at the end of the day, they're two heavyweights that are pure strikers. Rozenstruik can get a knockout, but I do lean decision probably more so than other people for if Rozenstruik wins the fight. We'll move on to Naimov versus Khan Ofli. Khan Ofli is a jiu-jitsu grappler, and you could make the argument that if he wins this fight at 7.2K, it could score well. It's just that it's really hard for me to see him winning this. Naimov is just better everywhere. I don't even know if Ofli is UFC level. I think he's a guy that we could see out of the UFC within a couple fights. Definitely not a play that I want to target, but I'll probably get some of him. And then for Naimov, on the other hand, not the best ITD line, but he is 9K flat, and I mean it's good enough, right? Like if he gets around round 1, round 2 KO, I think that could make it. So Naimov will be in play, and for single entry, I definitely have a lot of confidence in him to win. It's just that I'm not convinced about his ceiling as much as other fighters like Pavlovich and Mckinney. Next up, Jasmine versus Bueno Silva. I like both sides of this fight. You have Jasmine, who seemingly has become a tier 1 DFS fighter, just always putting up monster scores. What I like about her is once she gets takedowns, she's really active. She's always throwing ground strikes. Even if they're pitter-patter strikes, that counts for DFS. And that control time, all that stuff adds up, even in decision wins. So 8.9K, she is definitely in play, and someone I probably will prioritize this week. The only reason why I wouldn't get a lot of her is because I also want a lot of Bueno Silva. I think that her win condition is really finish dependent in this matchup. I don't see her being the minute winner on the feet, sure, but Jasmine is just going to be shooting takedowns the whole time, in my opinion. And in order for Bueno Silva to stop that, I think she's going to need to find a finish. So guillotine, knockout, very unlikely, but maybe in play. So at 7.3K, absolutely interested in Bueno Silva here as well. Shara Magomedov versus Michael Page. We have a striker versus striker matchup. We know what we're getting here, and that typically means a very bad DFS environment. We'll start off with Shara, who I believe has the higher finishing upside, plus 245 ITD compared to Michael Page, plus 450. So I guess he's the preferred side, but then again, on an 11-fight card, any given win from an underdog could be good enough. So then you kind of have to give respect to Michael Page, even with but his style is so low scoring without a finish. 53 points. If he would have won this, it would have been, sub 50 points? I mean, yeah, Michael Page, without a finish, he's just not scoring anything. So I do have to prefer Shara, actually, after thinking about it more. And I will say, I see a lot of people betting on Michael Page. If Shara wins a split decision, quote unquote, robbery in Saudi Arabia, I don't think you can complain. I mean, we know the game at this point. I mean, to bet a pure striker in a mostly striking matchup that shouldn't be clear one way or the other, and to do that, there's just no way you can complain if you get robbed by the Saudi Arabia judges. I just want to preface that because I know I'm going to see it and it's going to annoy me. But we'll move on to the next fight, which is Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. I like Vinicius Oliveira from a DFS perspective. He finishes most of his fights, and I think he has the power upside in this matchup. Saeed, despite the last name, he's actually primarily a kickboxer. He's pretty flashy. He's going to dance around the outside, throw spinning kicks, and he's very crafty. Has a great guillotine, but he is also very competent in the grappling. It's just not his go-to. He's not going to come out there and just start shooting takedowns. It's more of a backup plan or something he reverts to if the fight's not going his way. Saeed, 8.7K. I mean, for one, we have a little bit of line value on Oliveira. So that alone, plus his finishing upsides, Vinicius Oliveira is definitely a great underdog this week to target. Saeed plus 200 ITD. Definitely prefer the Oliveira side. The one thing I don't want to discount is I do believe if Saeed decides to start grappling in this fight, he's going to have a lot of success. I've seen Oliveira taken down pretty easily, so that's something to keep in mind. I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but it is in the range of outcomes. But I'd have to say that Oliveira is the better side of this matchup from a DFS perspective. Moving on to the main event, Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov. Tough one to call. So typically we're used to seeing Adesanya as a heavy favorite, 9K and up, and usually winning by striking moderate volume decisions at very high ownership and not getting there. He's probably one of the most overowned DFS fighters of all time. He's definitely one of like the dollar for dollar ownership for ownership percentage worst DFS fighters of all time. And there's a reason for that. It's because what do these sims, the optimizers, any projection system, what do they weight the highest? In my experience, win odds and 5-round fights. And that's something that Izzy has in almost all of his fights. Almost all of his fights, he's a big favorite, and almost all of his fights are 5 rounds. So I know why he's always very popular, but is it correct? I don't think so. I don't think he should really ever be popular. Now, it is a different conversation at 8.6K compared to like 9K and up, and an 11 fight card. But even with that being said, I mean, 92.5 significant strike line, that's not going to do it. You get 100 strikes, that's 40 points plus 30 for a decision win. You add in a few, other stats like control time against the cage, maybe some total strikes against the cage. That's 70, 75 points. And that is not what you want out of a chalky $8,600 fighter. So I think there's definitely ways that you can fade out Adesanya this week, and I actually recommend being under on him. I don't know what the field is going to be yet. I would presume 30%, and if that's the case, max 20%, max 15%. If you said you were going to completely fade out Adesanya, I wouldn't blame you at all. It sounds crazy because it's a main event, right? But we know what his style is, and unless we see him somehow come out here and shoot takedowns for the first time ever, I don't really see what will change. The other way he could get there is by a round 1, round 2 KO. Not likely. What's the chance of that happening? Maybe 10, 15%. So Adesanya, I think he'll be once again overowned compared to his chances of landing in the optimal. And for that reason, I will most likely be way under on him. Nasruddin Imavov on the other side is a little more interesting. He's no Merab either when it comes to fantasy points. Like, he's not putting up big scores either, but underdog pricing and all the takedown upside in this matchup, you have to prefer him as the DFS side. I think that's pretty clear. But I think you can make the argument to fade both, just presuming that Izzy wins the way he normally does, which is a striking decision, and then Imavov, obviously, he loses, he won't make the optimal. So I think you can make a case to be under on both sides of this main event. That's probably where I'll end up. But if I did have to choose a DFS side, it's the Imavov side at 7.6K. Moving on to Mike Davis versus Fares Ziam. Mike Davis, grappler with big power in his hands. He's typically going to come across the cage, start stalking you down, try to land a big shot, and then look to start shooting takedowns. And in this matchup, I think he can definitely do that. I think that he will have the power to back Ziam up. Ziam has no problem fighting off the back foot. Typically, he's a very patient fighter. I know we saw a masterclass performance in that Frevola fight. It was by far the best he's looked in his career. But again, we have to remember Frevola is the guy that will bring that possibility. He's the boomer bust fighter, and he gave Ziam the opportunity to shine, and he did. So credit to him. But I don't see that being the case here. I think we're going to see Ziam revert back to his old ways of the 65-point decision wins. And at these high 7K prices, 7.8K, and you're going to score 70 points in a decision win, and you're plus 450 ITD, I don't like it all too much. I think that Ziam is definitely one of the weaker plays this week, and Mike Davis, I think, carries most, if not all, of the upside in this matchup. Next up, Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. Lucas Alexander, we're going back to him this week. I understand the line movement. I understand why he's now the favorite. I think from everyone I've heard, they're all giving him a lot of let's just say everyone's down on him after the losing to Jekka Sergey. And I didn't watch that fight, and I was like, "Yeah, wait, how are you losing to Jekka Sergey? This is a bad look." But then I went back and rewatched it. What happened was there was some scramble. Alexander ended up on the ground, and then he got up and turned his back away from Jekka, and Jekka caught him as he turned back into him. Didn't see the punch coming, got knocked out. It was, long story short, it was a very low percentage outcome. It was very fluky in my opinion, and I don't really hold the Jekka loss against him as much as everyone else is for some reason. I mean, he got caught. It happens. So I think Lucas Alexander is the more skilled fighter. I think that he has potential to find a knockout here. With that being said, he is a pure striker. If he does go to a decision, it probably doesn't score all that great. But we do have Bogdan Grad on the other side of this fight, who, let me go to his last Contender Series fight. And he brings a pace, or at least in that fight he did. I mean, 102 strikes, 3 takedowns. You combine that with Bogdan Grad, I think he has, plus 170 ITD. I can't really argue with that. Even though I'm picking Alexander to win, I'm just leaning his way slightly to win the fight. From a DFS perspective, Bogdan Grad is a really good play, and I think Alexander is okay too. I mean, this ITD line plus 265, 7.9K, it's good enough. So I think this fight is one you're going to want both sides of. Moving on to the last fight, Hamdy versus Jamal Pogues. Pogues is what I can only describe as a point fighting heavyweight. I know that makes no sense, but that's honestly what I think he is. He's going to look to land his leg kicks, land his jabs, stay technical. Now, the one thing I'm confused about is every other fight or every 2 fights, he just shoots like 7 million takedowns. Like you can see 5 takedowns, 7 takedowns, and then 0, 0, 0, completely pure striker. I don't know what's going into that decision. I don't know when he decides to wrestle or to not. I have no idea. So if anyone has any information, if he's going to shoot takedowns in this fight or any guess, let me know. But if I have to guess, he's fighting Hamdy, who has a Greco-Roman wrestling background. I think that Hamdy is the one with the takedown upside in this particular matchup. And I think that Hamdy is the one with the power upside as well. So that being said, if you're giving me a heavyweight fight that's expected to go the distance, and one guy has the power advantage and the wrestling upside, I'm going to take that side. So Hamdy's my preferred lean for DFS. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty sloppy heavyweight fight that I don't really know what to expect. And if anyone has any guess or any reasoning if Jamal is going to wrestle in this fight, I would love to know. That's going to do it for today's video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.